My mom smiled and said, "Your sister's baby will be perfect." Then she turned to me and asked, "So, when's your turn?" I whispered, "It already happened." My 8-month-old daughter was sitting right there, and they pretended she didn't exist. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now let's dive into today's story. The house smelled exactly as it always had. Artificial lavender from the plug-in air fresheners, old carpet, and the faint trace of coffee that never quite left the kitchen. Brenna Holt stood on the front porch of her childhood home. Her daughter, Maeve, balanced on her hip and felt the familiar tightness in her chest that always came with returning to Plainview, Iowa. Maeve babbled something unintelligible and tugged at Brenna's hair. 8 months old, with dark curls that matched Brenna's own and eyes that seemed to take in everything with unguarded curiosity. The baby wore a yellow dress Brenna had found at a thrift store, freshly washed and carefully pressed. "Ready," Brenna whispered to her daughter, though she wasn't sure if she was asking Maeve or herself. She knocked twice and waited. The door opened. Lynette Holt stood in the entryway wearing a cream cardigan and the same gold cross necklace she'd worn for as long as Brenna could remember. Her mother's hair was styled perfectly, every strand in place, her makeup subtle but deliberate. "Brenna," Lynette said, her voice pleasant but flat. "Come in. Not you're here, or how are you, or let me see the baby. Just come in," like Brenna was a neighbor dropping off mail. Brenna stepped inside, adjusting Maeve's weight on her hip. The living room looked frozen in time, beige walls, brown couch with throw pillows arranged just so, framed Bible verses hanging in their exact positions from 20 years ago. Nothing had changed. Nothing ever changed here. Callie sat on the recliner near the window, one hand resting on her rounded belly. 24 years old, 3 years younger than Brenna, and glowing in that way pregnant women supposedly glowed. Her blonde hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. She smiled when she saw Brenna, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. "Hey," Callie said. "Hey," Brenna replied. Maeve squirmed, reaching toward the coffee table, where a decorative bowl of glass marbles caught the afternoon light. Brenna shifted her, pulling her back gently. Lynette moved past them toward the fireplace, where framed photos lined the mantel. Callie's high school graduation, Callie's engagement photo, Brenna's own high school photo, smaller, pushed toward the back. No photo of Maeve. "How are you feeling?" Lynette asked, looking at Callie. "Tired," Callie said, rubbing her stomach in slow circles. "But good. The nausea finally stopped." "That's a blessing," Lynette said, her face softening in a way it rarely did. "What did the doctor say at your appointment?" Brenna sat down on the far end of the couch, settling Maeve on her lap. She pulled a silicone teething toy from her diaper bag and handed it to the baby, who immediately stuffed it in her mouth and gnawed contentedly. "Everything looks normal," Callie said. "The heartbeat is strong. They said the baby's measuring a little ahead, actually." "Oh, that's wonderful," Lynette said, clasping her hands together. "This baby is going to be perfect. I can feel it." Maeve made a sound, not quite a word, but a loud, happy vocalization that echoed through the quiet room. She waved the teething toy in the air and kicked her legs. Lynette glanced in their direction for half a second, just long enough to register the sound, then turned back to Callie without acknowledgement. "We should start thinking about baby names," Lynette continued. "Have you and Trevor talked about it?" Callie nodded. "A little. If it's a girl, maybe Grace. If it's a boy, maybe Elijah." "Those are beautiful," Lynette said. "Traditional. Classic." Brenna watched her mother's face, searching for any crack in the facade, any sign that she might turn and look at Maeve, might ask how she was sleeping or whether she'd started crawling yet. But Lynette's attention remained fixed on Callie, as if Brenna and Maeve occupied a different dimension entirely. The realization settled over Brenna like cold water. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't an oversight. This was intentional. So, Lynette said, turning toward Brenna with that same pleasant, empty tone. When's your turn? The words hung in the air. Brenna felt her breath catch. She looked down at Maeve, who stared up at her with wide, trusting eyes, then back at her mother. It already happened, Brenna said quietly. Maeve squealed, loud and clear, as if adding her own confirmation. Lynette paused. Her smile didn't waver, but something flickered across her face, acknowledgement maybe or discomfort, before she smoothed it away and turned back to Callie. We should go shopping for nursery furniture soon, Lynette said. I saw the sweetest crib at the furniture store in Cedar Rapids. Callie shifted in her seat, her gaze dropping to her lap. Yeah, maybe. No one laughed. No one said, What are you talking about, Mom? Brenna already has a baby. No one corrected the obvious lie. Brenna's heart pounded. She looked at Callie, waiting for her sister to say something, anything. But Callie kept her eyes down, her hand still moving in slow circles over her belly. Maeve babbled again, louder this time, reaching up toward Brenna's face. Brenna caught her tiny hand and kissed it, feeling the softness of her daughter's skin against her lips. I should help with dinner, Callie said, standing carefully. She moved toward the kitchen without looking at Brenna. Lynette followed. I'm making that casserole you like. And just like that, they left the room. Brenna sat alone on the couch with Maeve in her lap, surrounded by beige walls and framed scripture and the overwhelming silence of being erased. She looked down at her daughter. Maeve grinned, drool sliding down her chin, oblivious to the weight of what had just happened. We're here, Brenna whispered. We exist. But in this house, she wasn't sure that mattered. 20 minutes later, Brenna stood at the kitchen sink, washing bottles. The water ran too hot, steam rising in small clouds, but she didn't adjust it. Her hands moved mechanically. Soap, rinse, shake dry, line up on the counter. Maeve sat in her car seat on the kitchen table, chewing on a cloth book and humming to herself. The kitchen looked exactly as it had when Brenna was a child. Same white cabinets, same laminate countertops, with a burn mark near the stove. Same cross-stitch sign above the window, Bless this home. She heard her mother's footsteps behind her before Lynette spoke. You know, Lynette said, her voice measured. This would all be easier if you didn't bring her everywhere. Brenna's hands stilled under the water. She took a slow breath, then turned off the faucet and turned around. Lynette stood near the doorway, arms crossed over her chest. Her expression was calm, almost sympathetic, as if she were delivering practical advice about the weather. She's my child, Brenna said. I know that, Lynette replied. But you didn't do things the right way. No marriage. No stability. People ask questions, Brenna. They talk. Let them talk. Lynette sighed, uncrossing her arms. You don't understand. This affects more than just you. Callie is getting married next spring. She's doing everything properly. I won't have her overshadowed by... By what? Brenna interrupted. By her niece? By reality? By your choices, Lynette said, her voice sharpening. You made this difficult. Not me. Brenna felt something shift inside her chest. Not anger, exactly, but a kind of clarity that came from finally seeing what had always been true. Her mother wasn't confused. She wasn't in denial. She had made a deliberate choice to pretend Maeve didn't exist because acknowledging her meant acknowledging Brenna's life, Brenna's decisions, Brenna's refusal to follow the script Lynette had written. So you erase her? Brenna asked, her voice steady. I'm protecting the family, Lynette said. The family reputation. The way people see us. You may not care about that, but I do. Maeve made a soft cooing sound from the table. Lynette's eyes flicked toward the car seat for just a moment before returning to Brenna. She didn't ask to be born into this, Brenna said. Neither did Callie, Lynette countered. Neither did I. But we all have to live with your decisions. Brenna picked up a dish towel and dried her hands slowly, deliberately. She looked at her mother, at the perfectly styled hair, the pressed cardigan, the gold cross gleaming against the cream fabric, and realized that nothing she said would change anything. Lynette had built her world on appearances, on respectability, on the careful maintenance of an image that had nothing to do with truth. And Brenna had just become a crack in that image. "I'm not asking you to lie," Brenna said quietly. "I'm asking you to see her." Lynette's jaw tightened. "I'm doing what's best." "For who?" "For all of us." Brenna nodded once, folding the towel and setting it on the counter. "Okay." Lynette blinked. "Okay. Yeah." Brenna picked up Maeve's bottles and put them in the diaper bag. "I understand now." She lifted Maeve from the car seat, settling her on her hip. The baby grabbed a fistful of Brenna's shirt and rested her head on her shoulder, tired from the afternoon. "Brenna." "I need to go," Brenna said, walking past her mother toward the living room. Callie looked up from the couch. "Already?" "Yeah." Brenna grabbed her jacket from the coat rack. "Long drive." "Drive safe," Callie said, but she didn't stand, didn't walk them to the door, didn't acknowledge Maeve. Lynette appeared in the kitchen doorway, watching with that same measured expression. "We'll see you soon." Brenna didn't respond. She walked out the front door, down the porch steps, and across the gravel driveway to her car, a 10-year-old Honda with a dented bumper and a car seat in the back. The cold November air bit at her skin. She buckled Maeve into the car seat carefully, making sure the straps were tight, then closed the door and stood there for a moment, looking back at the house. Warm light glowed from the living room window. She could see Lynette and Callie inside, talking, laughing about something. A perfect tableau of family. Brenna got into the driver's seat and started the engine. As she pulled out of the driveway, Maeve babbled from the back seat, already forgetting the house, the people, the quiet rejection that had filled every room. But Brenna wouldn't forget, and she knew, with absolute certainty, that she would never explain herself to them again. The drive back to her duplex took 40 minutes. The highway stretched flat and empty under a gray November sky, cornfields on either side stripped bare after harvest. Brenna kept the radio off, letting the silence fill the car except for Maeve's occasional sounds from the back seat, soft babbles, the rustle of her kicking against the car seat, the gentle rhythm of her breathing. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. She thought about Callie's face when Lynette asked, "When's your turn?" The way her sister had looked down at her lap, saying nothing. The complicity of silence. Growing up, Callie had always been the easy one. Pleasant, agreeable, the kind of daughter who brought home good grades and never talked back and smiled in church photos. Brenna had been different, too honest, too stubborn, too willing to ask questions that made people uncomfortable. Why do we have to pray before every meal? Why can't I wear pants to church? Why does Dad never talk about his side of the family? Difficult. That's what Lynette called it. "You're being difficult, Brenna." And maybe she had been. Maybe she still was. But Maeve was innocent, 8 months old, trusting, dependent. She hadn't chosen anything. She'd simply been born, and they were erasing her. Brenna turned off the highway onto the narrow road that led toward the edge of town, past the grain elevator and the gas station and the small park where she sometimes took Maeve on warm days. Her duplex sat at the end of a quiet street, half of a small house, painted pale blue, with a tiny porch and a shared driveway. The rent was cheap because the heat didn't work right and the carpet was stained and the kitchen faucet dripped no matter how tight she turned it. But it was hers. She'd signed the lease herself, paid the deposit with money she'd saved from her job at the hardware store. No one had co-signed. No one had helped. She pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine. Maeve had fallen asleep in the car seat, her head tilted to one side, her little chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Brenna sat there for a moment, watching her daughter sleep, and felt the weight of everything settle over her shoulders. When she'd found out she was pregnant, she'd been terrified. 26 years old, working retail, living in a cramped apartment, no father in the picture because he'd made it very clear he wanted no part of it. She'd spent weeks wrestling with the decision, feeling the weight of it pressing down on her from all sides. But then she'd felt the first flutter of movement, barely there, like a whisper against her ribs, and something had shifted. Not love, not yet, but connection, responsibility, the quiet certainty that whatever happened, she would figure it out. And she had. She'd worked through her pregnancy, saved every dollar she could, found this duplex, bought secondhand baby furniture from garage sales and Facebook Marketplace. She'd taught herself how to swaddle, how to recognize hunger cries versus tired cries, how to function on 3 hours of sleep. She'd done it alone, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. And now her family, the people who were supposed to love her, supposed to support her, were pretending none of it existed. Brenna unbuckled her seatbelt and got out of the car. She opened the back door carefully, unclipped Maeve from the car seat and lifted her out. The baby stirred but didn't wake, her small body warm and heavy against Brenna's chest. Inside, the duplex was cold. Brenna kept the thermostat low to save money, wearing layers instead. She carried Maeve to the bedroom and laid her gently in the crib, a white wooden one with a sagging mattress that Brenna had reinforced with plywood underneath. Maeve's eyes fluttered open for a moment. She looked up at Brenna, blinked twice, then closed them again and sighed, sinking back into sleep. Brenna stood there, one hand resting on the crib rail, and whispered the words that had been building inside her since the moment Lynette asked, "When's your turn?" They don't get to decide you don't exist. The baby slept on, oblivious, but Brenna meant it, every word. The withdrawal happened slowly, like pulling a thread from fabric. Brenna didn't make an announcement, didn't send a text or leave a voicemail explaining her decision. She simply stopped showing up. No Sunday dinners, no family group chats, no holiday plans unless someone invited her directly, and no one did. December came. Lynette sent a text. Christmas dinner at 2 p.m. Bring a side dish. Not "we'd love to see you" or "how's Maeve doing?" Just the logistics of a meal. Brenna deleted the text without responding. She spent Christmas morning in her duplex, the small artificial tree she'd bought at Walmart blinking with colored lights. Maeve sat on a blanket on the floor, surrounded by crinkly tissue paper and a few wrapped presents, mostly clothes from the clearance rack and board books from the thrift store. The baby tore into the paper with delight, more interested in the wrapping than the gifts themselves. She laughed when Brenna crinkled a piece near her ear, her whole face lighting up. Brenna's phone buzzed. A text from Callie. "You not coming?" Brenna stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "No." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "Mom's upset." Brenna almost laughed. She typed, "Is she upset I'm not there? Or upset that someone might ask where I am?" The 3 dots vanished. No response came. Brenna set her phone face down on the couch and went back to Maeve, who had managed to get a piece of tissue paper stuck to her forehead and was trying unsuccessfully to pull it off. "Here," Brenna said gently, peeling it away. "Better." Maeve grinned, drool sliding down her chin. Later that evening, Brenna heated up a frozen lasagna and ate it alone at her small kitchen table, while Maeve sat in her high chair, gnawing on a teething biscuit. The duplex was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the building settling. Her phone buzzed again, this time a photo in the family group chat. Callie and Trevor, her fiancé, tall and bland with a perpetual smile, standing in front of the Christmas tree at Lynette's house. Callie's belly was more prominent now, stretching the fabric of her red sweater. Lynette had captioned it, "So blessed to celebrate with family. Baby's first Christmas is going to be even more special." Brenna read the message 3 times. Baby's first Christmas. Maeve's first Christmas was happening right now, in this cramped duplex with the second-hand tree and the cheap ornaments. But in Lynette's world it didn't exist. Brenna set her phone down and looked at her daughter. Maeve had finished the biscuit and was now smacking her hands against the high chair tray, delighted by the sound. "We're doing okay," Brenna said aloud, though she wasn't sure if she was trying to convince Maeve or herself. The baby laughed, oblivious, and Brenna saved the text. Not to confront anyone, not to send screenshots or demand acknowledgement, just to remember. January was cold and gray. Brenna worked morning shifts at the hardware store, dropped Maeve off at a home daycare run by a woman named Rita, who lived 2 streets over, then picked her up in the afternoon and came home to the endless routine of diapers, bottles, laundry, dishes. Lynette sent updates in the family chat every few days. Callie had her 20-week ultrasound today. Everything looks perfect. Found the cutest onesies at Target. Can't wait to meet this little one. Trevor and Callie picked out paint colors for the nursery. Soft yellow, perfect for boy or girl. Brenna read each message with a kind of detached curiosity, like watching a play she was no longer part of. In February, Maeve started crawling. Brenna came home from work to find Rita grinning in the doorway of the daycare. She did it, Rita said. Went straight across the living room floor. Brenna's throat tightened. Really? Determined little thing, Rita said, laughing. Wanted that toy so bad, she just went for it. That evening, Brenna sat on the duplex floor and watched Maeve crawl in circles, her small hands and knees moving in clumsy coordination. Every few feet, the baby would stop, look back at Brenna, and grin as if to say, "Did you see that?" "I see you," Brenna whispered. "I see you." She thought about texting her mother, thought about sending a video, saying Maeve's crawling now. But she knew what would happen. The message would be read, maybe, and then ignored. Or worse, Lynette would respond with something polite and empty. That's nice. And then post another update about Callie's baby shower. So Brenna kept it to herself. Some milestones didn't need an audience. March brought warmer weather and the growing awareness that Maeve's first birthday was approaching. Brenna started planning early. She didn't have much money, but she wanted it to be special. She found a small cake recipe online, bought discount decorations from the dollar store, invited Rita and a few coworkers who'd been kind to her. On the day of Maeve's birthday, a Saturday in late March, Brenna woke up early and baked the cake in her narrow kitchen, following the recipe step by step. It wasn't perfect. The frosting was uneven, the layers slightly lopsided. But it was homemade and it was made with care. She set up decorations in the living room. Balloons taped to the walls, a banner that said "Happy First Birthday" in pastel letters. Maeve toddled around the room in a frilly white dress, fascinated by the balloons, reaching up to touch them. Rita arrived first, bringing a small gift wrapped in cheerful paper. 2 coworkers came after, both women in their 30s who had kids of their own and understood what it meant to celebrate the small things. They ate cake. They sang happy birthday. Maeve smashed her slice with both hands, frosting smeared across her face, laughing the whole time. Brenna took photos, posted one to her Facebook page. Just Maeve with the cake, grinning wide, frosting in her hair. The caption, "1 year of you. Best year of my life." She didn't tag anyone, didn't send it to the family chat. She just posted it and set her phone aside. Later that night, after everyone had left and Maeve was asleep, Brenna checked her notifications. A few likes from coworkers. A comment from Rita. She's precious. Nothing from her mother. Nothing from Callie. But then she saw it. A new post in the family group chat. Lynette had shared a photo. Callie's latest ultrasound. The grainy image of a tiny profile. The caption, "Can't believe we're only 2 months away from meeting my first grandbaby." Brenna stared at the screen until her vision blurred. First grandbaby. Not Callie's baby or another grandchild. First. As if Maeve, who had just turned 1, who had learned to crawl and wave and clap and say "Mama," didn't exist at all. Brenna felt something inside her harden. Not anger. Not sadness. Clarity. Her mother wasn't going to change. This wasn't a phase or a misunderstanding or something that would resolve with time. This was who Lynette was. This was the choice she'd made. And Brenna couldn't fight it anymore. She deleted the family group chat from her phone. Not dramatically. Not with a farewell message. She just removed herself from the conversation and went to bed. April passed in a haze of routine. Work, daycare, home. Maeve learned to stand, pulling herself up on furniture and wobbling there for a few seconds before sitting down hard on her diaper cushion bottom. She said new words, ball, book, no, and developed opinions about food, throwing anything green off her high chair tray with deliberate precision. Brenna heard through Rita, who apparently knew someone who knew someone, that Kelly's baby shower had been lavish, held at a community center, catered, decorated with an elaborate balloon arch. Lynette had invited half the town. "Did you go?" Rita asked casually one afternoon when Brenna picked up Maeve. "I wasn't invited," Brenna said. Rita's face shifted, sympathy flickering across it. "Oh, honey." Brenna shrugged. "It's fine." And it was not because it didn't hurt, but because she'd stopped expecting anything different. May came, and with it, a moment that cracked the family narrative wide open. Brenna heard about it secondhand from her cousin, Emily, who called her one evening while Brenna was folding laundry. "You're not going to believe what happened," Emily said, her voice pitched with the kind of gossip that spread fast in small towns. Brenna tucked the phone between her shoulder and ear, folding one of Maeve's tiny shirts. "What?" "Your mom ran into Mrs. Patterson at the grocery store. You know, from church." "Okay." "Mrs. Patterson asked about Callie's baby, said she heard it was due soon, and then she asked, 'So this is your first grandchild, right?'" Brenna's hand stilled. "And," she prompted. "Your mom said yes," Emily continued. "Just yes. No hesitation." Mrs. Patterson looked confused and said, "What about Brenna's baby?" "And your mom just." "What did she say?" "She changed the subject. Talked about the weather or something. Mrs. Patterson told my mom about it after church. Said it was the strangest thing." Brenna stood there in the middle of her living room, a tiny shirt clutched in her hands, and felt the absurdity of it wash over her. The lie was no longer clean. People were starting to notice. "Brenna." Emily said, "You still there?" "Yeah." "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Brenna said, though her voice sounded distant even to herself. "Thanks for telling me." After she hung up, she sat on the couch and stared at the wall. Maeve was already asleep in the bedroom, the baby monitor glowing softly on the coffee table. Brenna thought about Mrs. Patterson, a kind woman with gray hair who'd taught Sunday school when Brenna was little. She thought about the confusion on her face when Lynette denied Maeve's existence, the way the lie was starting to unravel, thread by thread. And she thought about how her mother would react to that. Not with honesty, not with acknowledgement, with tighter control, with more careful evasion. Brenna picked up her phone and opened Facebook. She scrolled to Lynette's profile and looked at the recent posts. Photos of Callie, updates about the nursery, excited countdowns to the due date. No mention of Maeve, not even once. Brenna closed the app and set her phone down. The distance between them was no longer something she was creating. It was something they'd built together, brick by brick, until it was too wide to cross. The graduation party happened on a warm Saturday in June. Brenna's cousin, Emily, was graduating from the community college with an associate's degree in nursing. The celebration was held at Emily's parents' house, a sprawling ranch-style home on the outskirts of town with a large backyard perfect for gatherings. Brenna almost didn't go. She stood in her bedroom that morning, Maeve sitting on the floor playing with blocks, and stared at the invitation pinned to her refrigerator. Emily had texted her directly, not through the family chat. "Please come. I want to see you. And I want to meet Maeve." That last part had made the decision. So Brenna dressed Maeve in a clean sundress, packed the diaper bag, and drove to the party. The backyard was full of people when they arrived. Tables set up with food, folding chairs scattered across the grass, kids running around with popsicles. Brenna recognized most of the faces, aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. And there, standing near the dessert table, was Lynette. She wore a pale pink blouse and white slacks, her hair perfectly styled, her expression pleasant as she talked to Emily's mother. Callie stood beside her, visibly pregnant now, her hand resting on her belly in that unconscious way pregnant women did. Brenna's stomach tightened, but she kept walking. Emily spotted her first and jogged over, grinning wide. "You came." "Congratulations," Brenna said, hugging her with one arm while balancing Maeve on her hip. Emily pulled back and looked at Maeve. "Oh my God, she's beautiful. How old is she now?" 15 months. "Can I hold her?" Maeve went to Emily willingly, curious and unafraid. Emily bounced her gently, cooing, and Maeve laughed. "You're doing a good job," Emily said quietly, meeting Brenna's eyes. "I know it's hard." Brenna nodded, her throat tight. They sat together at one of the tables, away from the main crowd. Maeve ate pieces of watermelon and smeared them across her face. Emily told stories about nursing school, about clinicals and exams and difficult instructors. Brenna listened, grateful for the distraction, but she felt eyes on her. Glances from relatives who hadn't seen her in months. Whispers behind hands. And then Maeve climbed down from Brenna's lap. She'd been walking for a few weeks now, still wobbly but determined. She toddled across the grass toward the dessert table, drawn by the colorful cupcakes. Brenna stood to follow, but Maeve was faster than she expected. The baby reached the table just as Lynette turned around. They stood face to face, grandmother and granddaughter, for the first time in months. Maeve looked up at Lynette, tilted her head, and said the words she'd learned at daycare, where the other kids called their grandmothers to pick them up. "Grandma." The entire yard went quiet. Not completely, but enough. Enough that the people nearby turned to look. Enough that Brenna felt the shift in the air, the sudden attention. Lynette stared down at Maeve, her face frozen. Maeve reached up, her small hands opening and closing, asking to be picked up. And Lynette stepped back. "Don't call me that," Lynette said, her voice low but firm. Brenna crossed the yard in 3 strides. She scooped Maeve up, holding her against her chest. "She's not confused," Brenna said, her voice steady but loud enough to carry. "You are." Lynette's face flushed. "Brenna, this is not the place." "Then where is the place?" Brenna interrupted. "When would be a good time for you to acknowledge your granddaughter?" People were definitely watching now. Conversations had stopped. Callie stood frozen near the dessert table, her eyes wide. Lynette straightened, her jaw tight. "You embarrassed us. You made a choice, and now you want us to." "I want you to see her," Brenna said. "That's all I've ever wanted." "You don't understand what it's like," Lynette said, her voice rising slightly. "What people say, what they think. I have a reputation." "And I have a daughter," Brenna said, "who exists, who is standing right here, who you've ignored for over a year because you care more about what strangers think than about her." Lynette's face went pale, then red. "You don't get to." "She called you Grandma," Brenna said quietly. "She doesn't know you're supposed to pretend she's not here." The silence stretched. Emily stood a few feet away, her hand over her mouth. Callie looked at the ground. Other relatives exchanged glances, uncomfortable, unsure where to look. Lynette's voice dropped to a hiss. "You did this. You brought this on yourself." And that was it. That was the moment Brenna stopped hoping for anything different. "Okay," Brenna said. She turned and walked toward the side gate, Maeve's head resting on her shoulder. She didn't run, didn't storm off dramatically. She just left, with the same quiet certainty she'd felt the day she stopped showing up to Sunday dinners. Behind her, she heard Emily call her name, but she didn't turn back. She got to her car, buckled Maeve into the car seat, and sat in the driver's seat with her hands on the steering wheel, waiting for the shaking to stop. Her phone buzzed. A text from Emily, "I'm so sorry." Another from a cousin she barely knew. That was messed up. And then, an hour later, a call from Lynette. Brenna stared at the screen, watching it ring. She almost didn't answer. But some part of her, some stubborn, hopeful part she'd thought was already dead, wanted to hear what her mother would say. Wanted to know if maybe, just maybe, Lynette would apologize. She answered. "Brenna," Lynette said, her voice tight. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Not I'm sorry. Not I was wrong. You embarrassed me." "I embarrassed you?" Brenna repeated. "Yes," Lynette said. "You made a scene. You made it about you when this was Emily's day." Brenna closed her eyes. "Mom, she called you Grandma. She reached for you, and you stepped back like she was." "You're tearing this family apart," Lynette interrupted. The words hung in the air. Brenna felt something inside her settle, like a door, closing softly but permanently. "No," Brenna said, her voice calm. "I'm stepping out of something that was already broken." "What does that mean?" "It means," Brenna said slowly, "that I'm done. I'm done explaining. I'm done hoping you'll change. I'm done pretending this is fixable." "Brenna." "You have a granddaughter," Brenna continued. "Her name is Maeve. She's 15 months old. She loves watermelon and board books and being outside. She's learning new words every day. She laughs when I sing to her. She exists, Mom. She's real." Silence on the other end. "And you've ignored her since the day she was born," Brenna said. "Because acknowledging her means acknowledging that I didn't follow your plan, that I made my own choices, that I'm not Callie." "This isn't about Callie," Lynette said, but her voice was defensive. "Yes, it is," Brenna said. "It's always been about Callie, about keeping up appearances, about making sure everything looks perfect from the outside, no matter what's actually true. I'm trying to protect." "You're trying to control," Brenna interrupted. "And I can't do this anymore." "So what?" Lynette asked, and there was an edge to her voice now. "You're just going to cut us out? Punish us?" "I'm not punishing anyone," Brenna said quietly. "I'm just done carrying a relationship by myself." "What does that mean?" "It means," Brenna said, looking through the windshield at the quiet street, "that you live with the story you told. You said Maeve doesn't exist. Fine, then we don't exist. Not for you." "Brenna, don't be dramatic." "I'm not," Brenna said. "I'm being clear. For the first time in my life, I'm being completely clear." She heard her mother take a breath, preparing another argument, another justification. But Brenna was done listening. "Goodbye, Mom," she said, and she hung up. She sat in the car for a long time after that, the phone silent in her lap, the afternoon sun warm through the windshield. Maeve had fallen asleep in the car seat, her little head tilted to one side, her cheeks flushed. Brenna felt lighter, not happy exactly, but lighter, like she'd been carrying something heavy for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to set down. She started the car and drove home. The months that followed were quieter. Callie had her baby in late July, a girl named Lily. Brenna saw the announcement on Facebook, a photo of Lynette holding the newborn in the hospital, grinning wider than Brenna had ever seen her smile. The caption, "First grandbaby. So in love." Brenna looked at the photo for a long time. She felt nothing. No anger, no hurt. Just a distant acknowledgement that the lie had become permanent. She didn't comment, didn't react, just closed the app and went back to her life. Her life, which had become something small but sturdy. She and Maeve had routines now. Morning walks to the park. Library story time on Wednesdays. Dinners with Rita and her grandkids. Playdates with coworkers' kids. Maeve was talking more now, full sentences sometimes. She called Brenna Mama and learned the names of colors and animals and foods. She was funny, curious, stubborn in the best possible way. And she was loved. not by a big family or a network of relatives, but by Brenna, and by the small community they'd built around themselves, people who showed up, who asked how Maeve was doing, who remembered her birthday. One evening in the fall, Brenna was washing dishes when her phone rang. Callie. She stared at the name on the screen, surprised. They hadn't spoken in months. She answered. Hello. Hey, Callie said, her voice tentative. Is this a bad time? No. What's up? A pause. Brenna heard a baby crying in the background. Lily, probably. Callie started, then stopped. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Brenna set down the dish she'd been washing. For what? For not saying anything, Callie said quietly. At the house. At the party. For just letting it happen. Brenna leaned against the counter. Okay. I was scared, Callie continued. I didn't want to make Mom mad. I didn't want to cause problems. So you let her erase my daughter instead. Silence. Yeah, Callie said finally. I did. Brenna waited. I know sorry doesn't fix it, Callie said. But I wanted you to know. I see it now. How messed up it was. Okay, Brenna said again. Can we? Callie hesitated. Can we talk sometime? Can I meet Maeve? Brenna looked across the room at her daughter, who was sitting on the living room floor, stacking blocks carefully. I don't know, Brenna said honestly. Okay, Callie said, her voice small. I get it. Maybe someday, Brenna added, but not now. Okay. They hung up. Brenna went back to the dishes, her mind turning over the conversation. Part of her wanted to forgive Callie, to rebuild something. But another part, the part that had carried Maeve through every ignored milestone, every erased moment, knew that forgiveness had to be earned, not just offered. And she wasn't ready yet. Maybe she never would be. Years passed. Maeve grew, started preschool, then kindergarten. She made friends, learned to ride a bike, developed a love for dinosaurs and strawberries and bedtime stories. Brenna kept working at the hardware store, eventually getting promoted to assistant manager. The pay wasn't great, but it was stable. She moved out of the duplex into a small house with a backyard where Maeve could play. They built a life that was theirs. Not perfect, not easy, but real. One evening, when Maeve was 6, she sat at the kitchen table coloring while Brenna made dinner. Mama. Maeve said, not looking up from her paper. Yeah, baby. Why don't we see your mom? Brenna's hands stilled over the cutting board. She'd known this question would come eventually, had prepared for it in the abstract. But now, faced with her daughter's curious, open expression, she felt the weight of it differently. She set down the knife and knelt beside Maeve's chair. Because, Brenna said carefully, love doesn't ignore people. Maeve tilted her head, thinking about this. What do you mean? I mean, Brenna said, that when you love someone, you see them. You pay attention to them. You show up for them. And she didn't do that. No, Brenna said. She didn't. Maeve nodded slowly as if this made sense. Okay. Are you sad about it? Brenna asked. Maeve considered this, her small face serious. Then she shrugged. Not really. I have you. And Rita. And my friends. Yeah, Brenna said, her throat tight. You do. Maeve went back to coloring, the conversation apparently resolved in her mind. Brenna stood and returned to the counter, blinking back tears she hadn't expected. Because Maeve was right. They had enough. They had neighbors who waved when they passed. They had Rita, who'd become more like a grandmother than Lynette had ever been. They had school pickups and birthday parties and Saturday morning pancakes. They had a life full of people who saw them, who chose them, and that, Brenna thought, was more than enough. On Maeve's 7th birthday, Brenna threw a party at the park. There were a dozen kids from Maeve's class, their parents chatting on the benches, a homemade cake shaped like a T-Rex because Maeve was still obsessed with dinosaurs. Rita helped set up decorations. A co-worker brought a piñata. Another friend organized games. It was chaotic and joyful, and exactly what Maeve wanted. Later, when the party was over and the kids had gone home, Brenna and Maeve sat on the swings, watching the sun set. "Best birthday ever," Maeve declared, kicking her legs. "Yeah." Brenna said, smiling. "Yeah." Maeve swung higher. "Thank you, Mama." "You're welcome, baby." They swung in comfortable silence for a while, the chains creaking rhythmically. "Mama," Maeve said eventually. "I'm glad you're my mom." Brenna's breath caught. She reached over and squeezed Maeve's hand. "I'm glad you're my kid." Maeve grinned and let go, pumping her legs to swing even higher. And Brenna watched her daughter fly through the air, fearless, happy, whole, and thought about how far they'd come. Not because of her family, but in spite of them. Because the day they denied her child, they lost both of them. And Brenna had never looked back. Not once. Not ever.